This is Dr. Allison Bremner with episode 4 of Cultivating Success. And the reason that I do this podcast is because I want to help students and recent grads hopefully be as successful as possible in business. And today I have a special guest, Dr. Jobarah, and she's going to be talking a little bit about after she has graduated. And so our podcast today is called Post-Graduation Life Unfiltered. So Dr. Nora, nice to have you.
Thank you, Dr. Allison. Really happy to be here. I'm excited to talk with you and share some insight to some recent grads and future chiropractors.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. When did you graduate? Where did you graduate from? And what's going on right now?
Sure. I graduated in June of 2021. So just last year, I graduated from Palmer, Florida. Since then, I have done quite a few things. I worked as an associate for a short while. I started a small practice, which has been great. Been able to see patients and get that practice to grow. I do coverage work for another doctor, and I also teach the radiology portion of the Upper Cervical classes at Palmer, Florida. So I'm a part-time instructor there as well.
Awesome. And so obviously you have direct contact with students. So that's why I wanted to have you on today to be able to talk to them. And being a recent grad, I think that you probably understand both worlds. It's been a long time since I've been in school. So sometimes I feel like I always asking students like their perspective because it's been a long time. What's one of your favorite things about teaching and being around students?
Well, I think you touched on it yourself. It's really, really great to be able to pour into students, into the future of the profession and have an influence on them. Just give them my experiences and teach them what I've experienced just over the past year. I feel like I've learned a lot in a very short amount of time. And I love being in front of those younger quarter students who, I was in that position not long ago and, able to share my experiences of, how I've transitioned into life as a doctor. I think it gives them a really great recent perspective as opposed to hearing a lot of information from people who graduated a long time ago.
So why did you want to come on today? What do you hope that students or recent grads take away from this conversation that we're having today?
So I really want to bring to light some of the challenges that recent grads experience and the struggles that they face getting out into the real world. And that transition period between being a student and being a doctor, it's rough. There was a huge learning curve there and just so many things that need to be addressed that are not addressed. So I hope that I can help clarify some things, help people make some decisions as they're getting closer to graduation. And once they graduate to, set themselves up for success.
Yeah, well, that is awesome. I do find that when I go and talk with students that they're a little nervous. They feel very unprepared to get into practice. I think that's a common thing across the board. And so let's kind of get right into some of those things. So my first question, and we talked a little bit about things that you get asked, but one of the big things is, what do you think are the biggest myths that are told in school from possibly other professors or other students that just kind of get passed around that you feel are not really true in real practice?
Sure. I think a big myth that people get told is that they have to have a very high volume practice, that they have to take insurance, that they have to have a lot of modalities and do a lot of these different things in order to be successful. I think that is really pushed, especially at Palmer, Florida. Of trying to be a jack of all trades and get all of these tools in your tool belt. And I think that makes it really difficult for people to find their passion, and find one thing to really focus on, and find a skill that they can really build on and grow because they're so focused on, oh my God, I need to do this, and this in order to be successful. And it's very stressful. It's very stressful. And it's hard to be happy in that kind of a situation.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first thing I'd like to touch on that, let's talk about for a second, is the high volume practice. Now, I am a proponent of doing whatever you want to do that makes you happy. But it seems the reason why they push a high volume practice is because either you're in an insurance-based practice or you're charging very little. And so when you do that, you have to see a lot of people to pay your bills. That's just math, right? And I think that on my last podcast, or maybe 2 podcasts ago, I talked about the difference between, the 100 patients a week at $20 or 20 patients at $100 a week. Now you get the same, you walk home with the same amount of money, but man, I bet you're pretty tired after seeing a bunch of people. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like if that fires you up, then great. But I'm just wondering at what point, how long can your body sustain seeing a high volume practice? I see some students that take a high volume associate position, for example, and are working, especially at the joint. This happens all the time. Well, hey, you get a lot of practice, but you are tired, your body's beat up at the end of the day. Have you experienced that before?
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked, I worked at the joint for a short while, just as a part-time thing, trying to make money, get experience as I was starting up my own practice. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get so burnt out, one, just by the sheer volume and the sheer labor, and that it's putting on your body. It's very demanding physically, but it's also a burnout mentally because it lacks that focus and that passion and that drive of really focusing on one skill and getting that one skill to grow, which I think just as students and even as humans, to focus on one thing and to get really good at that skill is so much more rewarding than just crunching through the same stuff over and over again and feeling like, you're just a workhorse. So yeah, the burnout post-graduation is a very, very real thing.
Yeah, I bet, and it's interesting. I don't remember honestly in school if they told us to take cash or not, but the thought of like that you can't do that, one is ridiculous. I mean, I only take cash and have for 10 years and it's not a problem at all. In fact, when people ask me, do you take insurance? They're just saying it because they have it. They're not saying, do you take insurance because I'm not coming to you if you don't take insurance? They're just saying, hey, I pay for this stupid thing. Is it possible that you take it? It's like, some sort of out of currency thing. Hey, I have this gift card that I know is probably expired, but do you possibly take this? And so when I'm like, no, I don't take that, they're like, yeah, I figured you didn't. So great. And so I think that students get nervous. They're like, I have to take insurance because they're going to ask me that question. And new associates I have in my office get fumbled up with that question. And I'm like, they're just asking. As long if you just say, no, I don't, they go, okay, great. Then they still want to make an appointment. So that's just absolutely ludicrous. I don't know why that's perpetuated in this day and age to take insurance.
I agree that it's ludicrous. I think a lot of it is a fear-based thing, right? People are afraid. People are afraid after they get out of school. They're afraid that they're not going to be successful, that they're not going to get patients, they're not going to make money. They think that they need to capitalize on every single potential opportunity of making money. So they think, I have to take all the insurances. I have to see all these Medicare patients. I have to do all of these modalities because I want them for me. I don't want them to go down the street. God forbid they go down the street.
Right.
It's just this fear that's perpetuated in chiropractic school, at least in my experience, that is, it's tough to break free from, for sure.
Yeah, well, let's talk about something else you touched on is that the not specializing. They're told that, well, you have to basically learn every single thing. You have to know how to, crack from your toe up to your head, and you have to use these modalities and rub this lotion on and, do all these ridiculous wackadoodle things so that you're able to make money. And that, again, I think that plays into insurance, right? So you can bill for all these things. But I think that, one of the reasons I want to start this podcast, it's specifically geared towards what I would call principal chiropractors. So chiropractors who value chiropractic and what it is, and they don't need to add anything to it. And not only can you survive, in my opinion, that's the only way to thrive in an office, because if you are doing a bunch of this stuff that you think you're just doing it to make money, eventually that's going to not be very inspiring to you or the patient. So let's talk a little bit about that in school. You think that that's something that's told a lot?
Sure. Yeah. When I was in school, I led the Upper Cervical Club, pretty much the entire time I was there. And when I would go and speak to the younger quarters and try to inspire them to come to our Upper Cervical Club, I would pose the question of, what are you going to do when you graduate that's going to set yourself apart? You're sitting in a room with 100 other students. We're all going to graduate and know how to do, general spinal manipulation and just do all of these basic things. But what are you going to do that's really going to set you apart from everybody else? And why are people going to drive past 10 other chiropractors to go to your office to see you? And the answer is because you have something specialized to offer. You have something different. You have something unique. You have something that's more powerful that you're able to offer. And when people see that and they understand that they'll pay any amount of money and they'll drive any distance in order to get that specialty.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that's very easy to be cash practice and see less. Again, you can see a high volume. That's not the important thing here, is that you don't have to see a high volume practice because people are paying you a premium price, which is going to allow you more freedom. and specialized care. You can give the best kind of care, because if you are slammed busy, it's much harder to give individualized top quality care. If you're seeing just everyone that's coming through the door, no matter what.
I think if recent grads and students thought of it in a way of, how can I really set myself apart? How can I be the best of the best? How can I be different and unique and market myself in a way where I'm not sharing the same population as the 30 other chiropractors in my town? Why bother doing that and going through the stress of doing that when you can be much more keen on a skill, be much more specialized, promote yourself in that way, and then you can do, what it is that you said. You can see 20 people and charge those people $100 and be a lot happier, a lot more passionate about what you do, get much better results, and just create an entirely different world for yourself as a chiropractor, as opposed to one who is, trying to pick up pennies. It's working smarter, not harder.
Yeah. And by the way, those 30 chiropractors are all going for 10% of the population. So 10% has been the steady number for the past 100 years of the amount of population that sees chiropractors. Wouldn't you want to go after the 90% of people who aren't seeing chiropractors? Instead, you're fighting over for this 10% because you're all doing basically the same thing, which is, it's not very smart. If you're just looking at it strictly from business, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
And I think in school, it's true that the curriculum is just geared to push out just an average, okay, decent chiropractor. You can do a little bit of everything, enough to pass boards, but that doesn't make you special. And I tell my students this, and I think that, some of them get a little offended, but I'm like, you getting out of the school with a diploma and knowing how to crack someone's neck does not make you special. That does not make you important. That doesn't make you valuable. That doesn't make people throw their money at you. You have to put in a lot more time and a lot more effort to figure out what it is that you truly want, the life that you want, what it is that you're passionate about, in order to really be successful. And I think students just don't know that. They don't realize that until they graduate, and then it slaps them in the face, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, let's talk about then. So that's the bad news. Let's talk about the good news. What do you think is the best thing to do if you're a student right now, or even if you just graduated? Like, what can you do to help bridge this gap between student mindset and being a chiropractor, being a business owner? What are the things that you think that they can do right now?
Yeah, I think a very general answer to anybody at any point, whether you're in first quarter or whether you graduated a year ago, is to go to more seminars, whether they are business-based seminars, if they are technique-based seminars, if they are seminars that it's something that you don't really think that you care about or not that you're super interested in, go to seminars. Because when you do that, you are automatically learning information that is not taught within the curriculum. So you are automatically a step ahead and out of the box compared to everybody else in your class who is not at that seminar. You are working and creating relationships and meeting people that you otherwise never would have met, right? That people that could potentially be preceptors or employers, or they get you in contact with people who know other people who is the perfect match for you. So when it comes time to getting a preceptor, you already have these relationships that are built. And it also just forces you to open your mind, and see what else is out there in the world of chiropractic. What they teach you in the Palmer, Florida curriculum is it's such a tiny percentage of what chiropractic truly has to offer. And there's this whole other world of chiropractic that you're just never even exposed to. And the only way to get that is for you to go out of your way and reach and grab it. It's not spoon fed to you. You have to go seek that information. So anytime you see a seminar, people, get caught up in the costs of things and, having to drive to Atlanta and rent a car and things like that. But that's what you're in school for. This is the time that you have to be doing those things. And let me tell you, those seminars get a lot more expensive when you're a doctor. So take advantage of them and go when you're a student. Okay. They're not that expensive.
Yeah, definitely. I talked to Danny Knowles last podcast, and he said the exact same thing. He was just saying that, hey, go to seminars now. One, it's not only half the price, it's a fraction of the price. Like, for example, Mile High, which we will both be at, for an early student ticket, it was like $50, which is like insane, right? It's like a tenth of the cost. And so one, it's a whole lot cheaper. Two, just like you said, those relationships, because I think that what happens is and I think I want to talk about this in a second, but like when you are getting ready to graduate and you want to do a preceptor, or you thinking maybe you want to work for somebody, if you're just like, oh, this place is close, I guess I'll work there. Like that's probably a recipe for disaster because you have no idea who that person is. And when you're at these seminars, you're meeting other students, other doctors, and that is really what's going to help you later is those connections. So I can't agree. Couldn't agree more is I think that those are things that you need to do. And yeah, so let's talk a little bit about preceptor. What do you think about that?
So preceptor is interesting. And so at Palmer, Florida, you're in the curriculum, you're in the school for 12 quarters. And then on your 13th quarter, you have the opportunity to go and be a preceptor or an intern at somebody else's practice. I think in the ideal situation, you are a preceptor with somebody who then you anticipate working for, right? So you kind of transition into an associate position after that. I hear very, very, very frequently, even people that I graduated with and now people who are going through clinic, they just feel a little lost when it comes to finding a preceptor, knowing where to find these doctors who want a preceptor, what to look for in a preceptor. I think it's this umbrella explanation of just people feeling unprepared.
Yeah, I think that, well, one, I think no matter if you want to open your practice yourself or you want to be an associate, I think that no matter what, you should do a preceptorship, because even if you're because I visited a lot of offices when I was in school, and more times than not, I saw stuff that I did not want to do. But that was still very helpful. I was like, okay, I went to this office and I saw 20 things that I do not want to do. And there's usually one thing that I'm like, that was awesome. I want to do that. I want to implement that. And so I think, visiting offices is a really good idea, but like the preceptorship, I mean, would you rather sit in the classroom and, quite frankly, learn some nonsense? Or do you want to, even if the office isn't exactly what you wanted, then I think it's invaluable information on the business side and probably on the chiropractic side as well. But to your point, if you are one of the people that are pretty smart out there that thinks that they want a good associateship, the best way to make sure that associateship is good is to preceptor for that doctor first, because you have 3 months to figure out, hey, do our personalities match? Do I think I could be happy here? Is this doctor supportive? Are they going to be a mentor to me? And worst case scenario, if you go in there thinking that, and then it's not that, hey man, you didn't sign a contract. After your 3 months are up, you can leave and find something that's better for you. So I just think that figuring that out and looking at these options early, because when you scramble for it at the end, you most likely are just going to find whatever's left over. And there's probably a reason why that position might be left over for you to go to.
Yeah. So I want to emphasize what you said about, exploring those options early on. So, people don't think about this until they're already in clinic or they're in 11th, 12th quarter. And like you said, scrambling to figure it out. But if you start shadowing offices when you are in first, second, third quarter, I encourage students to shadow at least one office every break. At least one. I mean, ideally it should be 2 or 3, but we're on a quarter system. So you have 4 breaks a year. So if you shadow 4 offices a year, by the time you get to 12th quarter, I don't know, math, 4 times 12, 48. That's 48 offices, practices that you've seen, and learning what you don't want is just as valuable and just as important as knowing what you do want. And by the time you're in 12th quarter, you have all of these options and all of these connections that you've made, getting an idea of where can I spend 3 months to, learn and grow before I make this big decision. The other thing with preceptor is that it's 3 months, right? So a lot of people end up choosing something that's close by, or just choosing a whatever office because it's convenient, because nobody wants to move somewhere for 3 months, and then have to move again. So again, if you start building these relationships early and you meet these doctors and have these connections with them early, you don't feel so stressed about, oh my gosh, I have to move somewhere for 3 months and then move again. Set yourself up for success, make these plans early, and it'll just be a much better learning experience for you. And you'll just be so much happier, choosing what it is that you truly want, as opposed to just, choosing what's convenient. You don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say in life, and specifically chiropractic, or being a chiropractor, the relationships, that's the most important thing. Hey man, I hope you're a good adjuster and you're a good doctor, but if you can be the best doctor in the world, if you don't have relationships, you're going to have a tough time. So that's one of the most main important things. And since we're already sort of in this subject, let's talk about being an associate. So obviously, if you're listening to my podcast, I highly recommend being an associate. Does that mean you can't open your own office? No. Some people totally can come right out of school and open their own office. But here's the reality. In America, 10%, that's probably a high estimate, 10% of people are self-employed. There's a reason for that, because most people aren't really meant to be self-employed. It's hard. It's very, very hard. And so let's just say chiropractors are exceptional. So maybe 5 times the amount of chiropractors can be self-employed or business owners. That's like 50% still. And so I just think that another myth I'd add to your list of myths of school is that like you're only successful if you open your own office, which is absolutely ludicrous. In fact, you can make way more money than you do opening your own practice, being an associate. You can actually make more money than the doctor. My associate last month took home more money in her pocket than I did, which is awesome. That's what I tried to set up. So what are your thoughts on that?
I agree that it is a huge myth. And I think a fear also of people feeling like they have to open their own practice to be successful. It is a huge misconception. It is absolutely not true. And I think people have, this ego and this overconfidence of like, oh yeah, I can totally do that. I'm a good adjuster. I went through school. I passed boards. I can run my own business. Sure. And it's just like, you really don't know what it takes. I mean, me included. I went to school to be a chiropractor for 3.5 years. I did not go to school to learn how to run a business. I had a few classes of, understanding business and billing, and it is just not enough to understand how to truly thrive. And that learning curve of trying to open your own practice outside of school is really, really steep. Now, that's not to say that you can't do it. I mean, people can definitely do it. And there are people that get out and, they thrive. And sometimes, you fall on your face a few times and then you learn and you learn and you learn and then you thrive. And I think that's what people are after. They're after that feeling of, triumph and like, I got through all of these trials and tribulations and like, look, I finally did it. I have my name on my office. But the reality is that if you can associate with somebody for 2 or 3 years, or maybe 5 years, you will curb that learning curve dramatically. And then if you decide that you still want to open up your business, great. You have 5 years experience under your belt. You've made some money. You can open your own practice with a lot more confidence and understanding of not only the business side, but knowing how to handle patients. If there's a bad situation or, a tricky clinical case that you don't know how to handle, it's really valuable to be able to go to walk down the hall and ask the doctor who has 20 years experience, hey, how can I handle this? How can I talk this patient down from this, stressful situation? Should I adjust this person or not? Right. Asking them those questions that people just don't even think about those situations when they decide to open their own practice. And I think that these things need to be talked about.
Yeah, definitely. This is the kind of last thing I want to say on this subject. So I don't want to I always kind of beat this into students, but let me give you a scenario that happened recently in my office. So I do knee, chest, upper cervical, which means that people typically come kind of far to see me. So this patient drives an hour each way. She messages me in the morning. I'm feeling terrible, like very nauseous. I got a really slow start. So already I know that she's not feeling well. So she finally gets to the office like 30 minutes late. I knew she was coming in late. She just looks miserable. Her scan looks perfectly straight. There's nothing I can do to make it better. And I go, Mrs. Jones, that's not her name, but Mrs. Jones, like, you know what? You are doing great. You don't need to be adjusted. And she starts hysterically crying. And she's just like, I feel terrible. I don't know if I can deal with this much longer. And so I listen to what she's saying. And I understand what you're saying. I understand symptomatically you are doing not well, but you do not need to be adjusted. In fact, if I adjust you, the only thing that can possibly happen is that you're going to get worse. And so I said, well, I'm absolutely going to rest you for at least 10, 15 minutes. And I want to take another scan just in case maybe you had a stress scan or you didn't acclimate. So she does that. Her scan comes back basically the same, perfectly clear. And at this point, what do you think happens? So most people be like, oh, she's like all mad. So she's coming in once a week because that's the bare minimum that I take on patients that have to come in once a week, driving 1 hour. She goes, I think I need to make sure I come in twice a week. Now, if you're an associate, I'm just trying to think about you, brand new in practice, and this patient is paying you $95 a visit. Yes, we charge $95 for no adjustment. And this person is very symptomatic, and you have to sit there and say, not going to adjust you. This is the best thing for you. I think that that's very hard as a brand new doctor. But if you're an associate and you have another doctor backing you up, knowing that this is the right, because what would happen? That patient goes and rests. That associate's coming to me and like, will you look at this scan? Like, will you tell me like, this is what's going on? And I, if I'm the head doctor, I can say, you're absolutely right. She does not need to be adjusted. In fact, you're going to mess up this case if you adjust her. So do not do that. You have that stability and confidence to do that. Very challenging on your own. I just don't see it happening.
So I agree with you. I came out of school feeling very confident. I felt very confident in my skills. I spent a lot of time going to a lot of seminars and getting good at, my upper cervical technique. I would say that I felt a lot more confident in my skill than a lot of people do coming out of school, because I had just put that much time and energy into it. But even saying that, I have still been in situations where I am in my office with one patient. It's just me and that patient running my own practice. And there are cases where I feel like I don't know what the right decision is, or I would really, really, really like a second opinion right now. I wish I could just call somebody up and, hey, can you drive over to my office really quick and check this patient? I'd love to hear the opinion of somebody who has way more experience than me, because as confident as I am and as good at my skill as I think that I am, I'm still a brand new doctor. That's just the reality of it. There's no way that I am as good at what I do as somebody who has, 10, 15, 20 years experience. And I think that just goes back to the ego thing. You want to be the doctor in the room, the one who calls all the shots, but that is not what your patient needs. That is not what the correct answer is clinically for the patient's well-being. So I think that that's a hard pill to swallow for some people, but it is so, so, so valuable to have that second opinion and to have somebody to back you up and to have somebody guide you in moments where you need help, because we all need help. It's just the reality of the situation. No need to be, naive or overconfident about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, you just graduated a little bit ago. So what are the common things that you hear from your classmates? The struggles, I guess I'm asking what you hear.
Yeah. So I hear a lot of classmates end up in situations, in jobs that they don't like, in jobs that they are doing things that they're not passionate about, that they don't care about. And they just took the job because they're getting a paycheck, right? They graduated, they have bills to pay, they're worried, they're stressed, whatever first job opportunity they can get, they take, and they end up miserable. And, I often compare this to relationships. So you need to know what it is that you want out of your relationship or out of your associateship. You need to know what it is that you want out of your job, because if you just take the first job that's presented in front of you, if you just date the first person who comes in front of you and expresses interest to you, like, ouch, like that's probably not going to end well. You need to be picky, and you need to know what it is that you want and what kind of environment you will thrive in order to be happy and successful. I think that that's the biggest thing that I hear from recent graduates, is that they're just not happy. They're just working as a workhorse for some doctor who's paying them not enough money, and they get burnt out.
Yeah. And I think it's to your point, is that, when you have a good relationship, you are going to thrive in that environment. And so I think that goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, is you can establish that relationship and know what you want, and then you're going to get into a good situation. And yeah, Dr. Colby Wilson, who's in my office, gets questions all the time about what she's doing. How is she doing that? And honestly, she's just following directions, and she's got a dynamic personality. So that combination of her wonderful personality in the office and following the directions that we've set the systems for her, of course, she's going to thrive, and she's doing great. We're getting a little close on time. So I do want to kind of wrap this up with you. And I always end with 2 questions. And so my first question is, what's the best business decision that you made since being out of school? And what do you think is the worst business decision that you've made out of school?
Ooh, okay. Loaded, kind of personal question.
Okay.
Let's see. Best business decision that I made is my most recent business decision that I made, which is a pretty dramatic one, which is deciding to take a position as an independent contractor at an office in Denver.
Yeah.
So I negotiated a great contract with an employer who I get along great with. And we have created an agreement where she can thrive and I can thrive and we can work together, build on each other, where we can both really be happy and both also make a lot of money.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably your best business decision that you've made, knowing you now.
Yeah. Worst business decision I ever made. When I decided to open my own practice, I made a lot of quick decisions and signed a lot of quick contracts without really looking into the details and the intricacies of things. I ended up signing a lease or I financed an X-ray software that had an outrageous interest rate. I mean, outrageous, like horrible, horrible interest rate. And not only does it have a horrible interest rate, but I am not even allowed to pay down the principal of that finance until I make 24 payments on the interest that I agreed to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, those are things that you just don't really learn. And you're just so excited to get the things that you need. You're like, oh, you're going to give this to me? I'll sign it. It's kind of like your student loans, right? Like,
Right.
I remember sitting in student loan classes and being like, where do I sign? And are we done? I don't even, because you don't think about it, because you just don't know about money, really.
Right.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that those are two great answers. And I always love asking my interviewees those questions, because I think hopefully, I mean, again, I think both of us hope to have this podcast and be available for students and recent grads to avoid some of these bad decisions that I know I've made a lot of bad business decisions. I made a lot of good ones. And so if I can help in any way, I'm always available. So you can always, email me, find me on Instagram and ask me some questions. I'm always open. And my office always is available for shadowing. So if you ever want to shadow, you want to come out to Colorado and hang out, love to have you. You can come and shadow anytime. Dr. Nora, anything else you'd like to share?
I hope that you guys all learned something and had some takeaways from this podcast. I continue to talk towards students and recent grads, and trying to help them out and guide them through my social media as well. So you can follow my Instagram. It's the Light Chiropractor, LIGHT chiropractor. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. All right, guys. Well, this is Cultivating Success. We do a podcast every first and third Monday, interviewing docs in the field to give you information and hopefully help you be as successful as possible. That's all I got. See you guys later. Bye.